little bit difficult for you to kind of join in the full discussion, but maybe we'll just start first here, and I think we've learned a lot this afternoon about how smart also technologically works, so that we understand better what are the actual ways of implementing smart. Because we were talking very much before that about what is an intelligent city, and criticizing when it is too much technically focused without asking the questions, which you have asked also, again. And so that pulls us sort of into the end of what we've been discussing. But we were concentrating also very much in the three very different aspects, but with the same technological backgrounds. So that maybe we are in a position to talk about smart in the context of what I said last night. Utopia, dystophy, or something in between. And I think probably in many cases, maybe in between. But maybe I can just, I think I can see very much the enthusiasm for what we can do to become more green, more even inclusive in a way, by using technological smart ways. And we see many ways of saving resources, optimizing all kinds of systems, but then we see the other. The big question, which I think also in the German conversation also has very often is very dominant. I think the question of, which we did start off with yesterday, sorry, I'm just giving a quick kind of pulling things together again. The question yesterday, and which we also had this morning, is of course, who owns the data, who owns the city, who are we doing what for, and who makes the decisions. So that's the kind of backdrop to where we are now in this panel, looking at how actually with sensors, with participation, this actually works. So I would just maybe ask, I think also, perhaps we can start with you, Samantha, if I may, because you have showed us very clearly with the example of China, a system which may be being used in our aging society, where we were talking this morning about the reduction of working places possibly, but a lot of work. You could have very different systems of encouraging and being inclusive, using this kind of thing. But of course, with the Chinese example, then where is the danger? Where do you think it starts? I mean, your example was China, but what if you're not looking at China, but talking about what your colleagues here have been talking about in European context?
I think my personal research and what I've looked at is, I think the scariest thing to me is that these systems for self-managing or people participating in their own management, China is able to export. And part of the reason for bringing up China's definition of state security, not just being about physical borders, not just being internal and external security related to borders, but being an idea space, is that, to me, this technology can be used to expand Chinese state power. And so you have cases where people overseas are harassed. Say, there were stories in the Wall Street Journal this week and Radio Free Asia about Uyghur journalists living in the United States, and I think, I might be wrong, but I think one was at least a US citizen, but their family were still in China, and their family were arrested. And so if you think about something like social credit and this technology and the power that it could potentially have to control people that are far outside of China's borders, to me that's scary. And then the other thing that's interesting to me is just we don't really know, a lot of the technology that we're talking about is emerging. We don't really know much about how it can be used in the context of like Chinese control, social control and political control. So one thing I know is that the technology that you were talking about with the data, the tracing of objects, I know that that's a type of technology that the Chinese have an active interest in. It could be benign, but you know, the concept is that it's integrated into everyday social and economic life, so it's not necessarily clearly coercive.
Don't wait for me to ask a question. Don't wait for me to ask a question. Maybe just ask if you would like to comment on the possibilities of the misuse of data. And of course, especially when I'm thinking, watching everybody in the city is in one way wonderful for the optimization of traffic flow or whatever, but it could of course have very different uses. So is that a question which also in Santander or in Spain is a question?
Okay, I will try to continue in this discussion. I mean, this is also a recurrent topic. So I mean, sure. we are trying to solve issues which are, I tend to say that are not yet clear for us because the final implications are not clear. I mean, once we have technology, this is my perception, we have to accept, perhaps we don't agree, but we have to accept that we are in one way or another way monitored. And this is true, but not now. This is true from the moment that when GSM system was conceived. So the former cellular systems in the 90s already were accepted by all of us as a fantastic opportunity for communicating everywhere between all of us, but we pay the cost of being monitored everywhere, every day. So I mean, and so far, frankly speaking, so far I have not yet heard any complaint on that point. Who owns the data that the operators, the mobile operators, are gathering from all of us in the last 30 years? The operators. And we have accepted that. We have accepted that. We haven't asked for any euro by the fact that they know when I am leaving home, going to the work, coming back to the school, picking up the kids, etc. And why suddenly now we are changing this? Why we are so worried about that? I mean, I accept that we have to be worried about that, but I mean, I think that the point is that our mentality is changing. 30 years ago, I think that we were not aware, we didn't have the awareness in the framework, and based on the experiences that we have had so far with the internet, with the web, with the Google, with the Facebook, with all this stuff, now suddenly we are mature. We are now beyond 18 years. So we have discovered the risks of the data. But guys, that is coming more than 30 years ago. So.
Yeah, just to follow that up. So somebody's probably said it before, but I haven't heard it said, that the creation of Facebook was probably the greatest gift to the CIA ever. We give away vast quantities of personal data willingly every day. But the reason we do that is because we get something in return. There is a clear exchange there. It's not always clear, actually, I think, from Facebook, for example, or social media, what's being done with the data. And there is a worry around that, of course, but we still continue to use it. So there's a challenge around public authorities. I think that the key question, really, particularly with public authorities collecting data, and mobile operators to an extent as well, is transparency. It's, you know, just knowing what's being collected and then what's being done with it, I think helps that exchange. And then the realization that actually there is some value being returned. I think that's the value process that we need to go through in order to move forward. It's not that simple. There are lots of legal issues as well, which I don't think we've really got time to get into. But I think we need a little self-awareness about just how much data we are giving away. I mean, if you carry a mobile phone with you, you're being spied on all the time. And, you might not want to call it spying, but you're being monitored. And that's the reality.
Yeah, following up, I think that if there's a point we can all agree, is that data and technology is not the goal, is the way, is the mean, is the tool for achieving something. And we will discuss about this, which is better cities, better happiness, friendlier cities, emotions, love, why not? Okay. So also closing the loop around cities, I definitely agree. The role of research, the role of technology people should also be managing this data, of course, understanding the potential, but also show people, technical and not technical people, what are the future scenarios. What if? We have an idea, it's the future craft. So what if I set these rules, I set this game, let's take this future craft, let's go in that future. How does it look like? Do we like it? What are the questions? What are the problems? What are the parts we like and we don't like? With the result in mind, we can say, okay, probably that rule wasn't very good. That use of data wasn't very good. That policy wasn't very good. That worked. So that's a way of closing the loop and stimulating a discussion, which is not just technical, but I think it's really by people at large.
Okay. Do you think there is also a cultural issue in this? I think very often, especially in the German discussion, when we have a discussion about, for instance, cameras, CCTVs, and these kind of things, it gets to be a very tense kind of a discussion here, whereas we had this discussion a couple of years ago when we talked about democracies, and we were talking about London, where you have cameras everywhere, so you can either feel you are being observed and you don't know what's happening to your data, or you can feel that, in fact, you are safer to be able to use public space. So, do we have to make a difference between your phone or your smart TV or whatever in your home, which is gathering very private data about you, and the gathering of data in the public space, where maybe it even makes public space more usable than if it's not being monitored?
So the point of camera is a very good point to discuss about. We should really concentrate on what's the goal. So what we want cameras for? For better traffic management, for environmental quality, for safety. So if the goal is traffic management, for example, so we basically need cameras on the street for looking at parking spots, for optimizing the traffic light cycles, for understanding how to manage the roads. Probably we don't need cameras, right? We can use just thermal cameras. So thermal cameras is a technology that basically detects the temperature, okay? So you can basically count people and cars and everything that is going on in the street without taking images of people. So we don't have that problem of privacy. We don't have the problem of storing data, who owns the data. So I think that, of course, we should discuss about this, but we should always keep in mind what's the goal? What do we want to achieve? There are many technologies out there. Some of them has good pros, some of them has good cons. Let's just cherry pick and take the technology that better fits our needs and worries.
The two of you, and then we'll go to the public.
So I think that you touch an important point, and just thinking in loud. So I mean, personally, once I have cameras in a public space, so I think which is the reason why we have now plenty of cameras in public spaces, and then it's just a matter of saying, okay, the humans, we are misbehaving, right? So what it happens is that we have specific problems which are based on terrorists or whatever, and then it means that by the fact that the human beings who are behaving in the wrong direction, we need to create an overlay network based on cameras, in that case, or whatever technology, that is true, is violating our privacy, but there is one reason. I mean, personally, I feel safer in an area in which I know that there are cameras. So, I mean, it's a matter of us, the fact that cameras have been deployed in the cities. The data that you are referring to, which are explicitly related to the private use, I mean, I think that the regulation is quite conservative in the sense that, or the new regulation that is going to be applied starting 25th May, right? I mean, is going, at least is trying to address the privacy issues related to the person, to the human, right? To the singular person. But this is a different step. So, I mean, we have to guarantee that the data, those data which are really private, as you say, and of course we have now to discuss, it is private or not the fact that one camera is filming you in this park at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday when it should be supposed that you should be working. I mean, this we have to discuss, right? But I mean, I think that you know what I mean. So I think this, we have to differentiate what is really, let's say, violates your privacy, like the case in which you are using your smart TV and you select the football match between Milan and Barcelona, or you are in a public space in which just for keeping the security we need to put cameras. And it is not enough to put the thermal camera because I need to distinguish who is the person that is there. So, I mean...
Give a somewhat more abstract answer, but one of the questions that was asked of me during the coffee break was whether or not how Chinese feel about social credit. And the answer is that according to people who are doing this research, which I'm not one of them, but the answer is that actually, well, people don't really mind. Because China has a very low trust society, and that's something that is directly related under the CCP to the Cultural Revolution. And so in some ways, building trust is seen as something that's necessary in order for economic development to work. And actually, privacy is an important issue in Chinese debate, and it's something that the Communist Party has addressed in legislation or is attempting to address. But the difference is that privacy ends where the Communist Party's power starts, or is at risk. So there's, you see some built into some of the legislation. There's some discussion about how to protect personal privacy, but that's only to the extent that. Maybe business access to the information. It doesn't have to do with the government. The government could access everything that it wants, and that's very clear. So I think it's just a very different, different concept. Yeah.
I was just going to respond to your question directly about cultural differences, and I think they're certainly a factor. I mean, the UK may have been noted, has got the highest number of CCTV cameras per capita, I think, in Europe. But it's not very often commented on. And I think the reason for that is that there hasn't really been any high-profile cases of abuse of the data that's being created from them. And I think that's what would trigger it. But, and of course, we do have real experience of terrorism. Sorry, I missed that.
That we are aware of.
That we're aware of. Yes. Fair point. Yeah. And I'd like to think that actually, if there had been, that we would be aware of them somehow because they would manifest in some way. So our experience has, by and large, been positive. That's not the case in other countries.
Maybe one last question, then we go to the public. Because I was just thinking, we're not able to go into it in depth, but last night we did talk. We have our title for Karlsruher Gespräche is the artificial intelligent city. So if we're sort of talking about where we are now, on the way to smart, very digitized and whatever, but of course on the brink of becoming more and more artificially intelligent. And I think when we see the differences here in systems, if we think of a large, powerful, geostrategically important China, which is also becoming more and more embedded, if you like, in many other countries through whatever. Do you think that this is a further thing we have to think about when suddenly we go on and the IT world becomes more so that the machines really are collecting the data, using the algorithm, but then really making more decisions about as well. Should you really be in the park at 8 o'clock in the morning or whatever? Is this something we really have to think about? Because we were talking about what is the city in 2040. I said that last night, interestingly enough, and you brought it up today. What is the city in 2040 and not just in 2025? Is this a new risk which we have to look at in the connection of smart cities? Just one quick answer and then we go to the public.
Okay, let's just, let's see if I've got the drift of your question right. But I was thinking, my alternative title for my talk was, what can you do when the air conditioning breaks down and you can't open the windows? Because that's the kind of scenario we're looking at. And in fact, I had this experience in Singapore a few weeks ago. It didn't break down, but I wanted to open the window because I wanted some fresh air, and I couldn't. So all the decision-making, all the control had been taken away from me. And I think that's vital. We can't allow ourselves to end up in a situation where that is the case. That's something we need to guard against as we develop these smart cities. I'm not sure if that was a direct answer to, yeah.
It's very much related to that, so
yeah.
Yes, we'll take that as it is.
So, I mean, two points, right? So the first one is, it is clear, at least this is what I perceive, that we are in the direction towards what I call an autonomous city. What does it mean? So a city in which an engine will be able to behave in a predictive way for optimizing the different processes and services running in a concurrent way in the city. But what does it mean? It means that it's going to operate on the average of the population. So it means it will not behave on top of a specific citizen or individual. So I think that we have to differentiate that. So I mean, the machine, the engine, will operate aiming at optimizing the community. So, but we don't have to interpret that as the fact that a single machine running the city is going to control whatever, the window or the air conditioning or whatever. I think this is a different stuff. This is my...
Gilder, a writer, wrote, because of the technology, because of the fact that we can communicate from very long distances without being present, we are headed towards the end of the cities. So cities in the future will not be existing anymore, because we don't need to be physically present in the same spot. So it's very hard to be a futurologist, because this provision was very, very wrong. Right now there are more cities in history than ever. So I think that the human component in how a city works, how relationships work, will always be predominant, because that's the way we work as humans. I really like your story of your two friends meeting at the bus stop and getting married. So that's serendipity, right? Finding something into the chaos, into the chance of the million of possibilities in the world. This is something that we as humans really like. And that's why I think we should really design and perceive technology for helping this. So for creating a better environment, for not doing ourselves the works we don't like to do. Nobody wants to work on a toll in a highway, right? That's why we should get rid of those jobs, but then get new jobs and new environment for stimulating what we as humans really like.
So, und jetzt würden wir
I could just reiterate one of the things that I said in my talk, which is that I think China's objective isn't an autonomous system, it's an autonomic system. And it's autonomic because it's using, I mean, basically, even technologies is the latest development in social management, the latest way of augmenting existing social and political control strategies. So it's almost like, I don't know if anybody in here is familiar with autonomic computing. It's a concept that was popularized in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and I feel like that's the best way of describing what China's doing. It's like a self-optimizing system, a self-protecting system that takes away some of the demands on the party, but doesn't take away the party's authority, and in fact, it augments the party's authority.
Yeah.
So.
Ja. Okay, so jetzt gehen wir ins Publikum. Who would like to answer the question about, sorry, you don't have headset? Shall we get one for you? The question was on the question of loneliness and how, who would like to make a comment? Well, we, of course, an interesting development in the UK.
You were talking, sorry.
About loneliness.
Yes. Were you referring to my story or
to the politics in the UK?
Oh, yes.
I don't really talk about politics in the UK at the moment.
We'll
but,
come on to that.
Just because of loneliness being identified as our question where we have to come up with answers. What do we do in a smart city about loneliness? Do we have answers?
So I didn't see the movie yesterday, so I'm not sure of what you're talking about. But speaking about loneliness and picking up that story, which I really liked. So if the problem is loneliness, let's talk about it. Let's try to find solutions for the loneliness in cities. So for example, why do we still invest so many money on self-driving cars? We don't divert those monies to create better buses so that people can enjoy, go and take the bus and meeting at the bus stop. So it's just a matter of choice. I know there are a lot of economical powers behind it. I know these just words. I know. I'm completely aware of this. But if the problem is loneliness, let's talk about this.
So it's well recognized that as cities get more densely populated, instances of social isolation actually increase. And so the way that we design our spaces, I think, is vital. One of the reasons that happens, of course, is if you're trying to fit more and more people into a city centre, the pressure on space means that you end up removing some of the places where people can go to socialise. So you need to think very carefully about design. Now, but one of the images I had on one of my slides was of it was a bench made by a company called Strawberry Energy. It's somewhere you can go to. It's solar powered. You can go to charge your mobile phone, play games. But the point is, it has more than one charging point. So while you're there, excuse me, charging your phone, you can start talking to the person next to you who's also charging. So it's small touch points like that, design ideas like that, that I think will begin to help address some of the challenges. I mean, that's not a mass scale solution, but I don't think we'll achieve it through any one single solution. I think it's going to be lots of small things like that, thinking very carefully about how we design our spaces to maximize interaction.
I think obviously public space is a big issue with regard to loneliness, but I was also referring to, if I saw a headline recently, which was right, in the UK they also have now a minister for loneliness. Is that true?
That's true, actually. Yeah, it was. That happened. Yeah, literally, I think a month or two ago. That it's become a. I'm not sure it's his or is it her. I can't even remember who it is. Their only role it may be. I haven't looked at that closely, but you're right. That appointment was made. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. I think it's an extremely important point because we had last year with the Karlsruher dialogues the question of pluralistic society, and we also have had a lot on populism and autocratic development of many societies, also in Europe, not just in other countries, Eastern Europe, but many, many countries. So I think this whole question about, which we also have heard about today and also last night, how do we know what is private and how do we know what is not private? And I think that's, so, you know, I think we have to look at this and really be very open and in our discussion about this.
So I'm not an expert in privacy, in self-exposing, but I think that historically there's an everlasting question. Before technology, what is public, what is private? Whatever I tell to a friend is kind of public, whatever I tell on the street is kind of public, whatever I don't tell anybody is private. And we kind of knew how to deal with this. The problem is technology, okay? My answer was kidding, no. The real answer is just read all the small characters when you click yes, I agree, and you'll know everything. Okay, it's not possible, because someone did a study that if we read out loud all the things we agreed on, the time for reading them out loud, it's longer than our lifetime, okay? So it's not possible. Yeah. A good rule of thumb is, as we are not so ready for understanding this approach, self, other technology, a very good rule of thumb is whatever you do online, it's public. It might be too extreme, but it's a very good rule of thumb. So before doing anything online, just consider, what if everybody in the world knows this? It might be too extreme, but I think it's good as a starting point.
Okay.
So I just wanted to respond to the question directly, with a slightly different answer. Well, to start with, it's the same answer, which is no. But I think we need to think about where we've come from with the internet, because when it first became mainstream, 20-ish years ago, we got used to everything being free. Free search, free web search, free browsers, free everything, pretty much. And the reality, of course, is that nothing is free. So if you want a different model, you have to create it. Now, there's a lot of peer-to-peer business models appearing now. For example, for money lending. It's not impossible that model could be used for creating a social network where you all own your own data, and there isn't a central organization like Facebook that's collecting it. But it takes a movement to do that, and it takes a willingness to invest some time and possibly some money. And the question is, who's willing? Or are you going to keep making that trade-off of getting that free social network and those free searches free in exchange for giving away your data? Because that's the deal. You're going to change the deal, change the business model.
There's a good sentence saying, if you're not paying for it, it means that you're selling yourself.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
If you read the text of, in December, a clarification of the 2014 counter-espionage law was released. And if you read the text of that, it effectively says that somebody like me, who does not work for a government, who is not a spy, could be charged under that law. And so, yeah, it is a concern.
So, first of all, many, many thanks to the panel. And we have a very interesting agenda point coming up, which was, I won't say anything at the moment. I'll introduce everybody and they're going to do their thing. Okay? Thank you.